My name is Emma Calloway. I am 34 years old. 3 weeks after my father was buried, our family gathered in a lawyer's office to hear his will read aloud. My sister Olivia sat across from me, in a pressed blazer with her husband beside her, holding her hand like they had already counted the money. My husband sat next to me and did not look at me once during the entire reading. Not once. When the lawyer finished speaking, the room went quiet in a particular way that rooms go quiet when something has been decided and everyone is processing what side of it they landed on. My sister had been given the downtown apartment complex, prime real estate, multiple units, the kind of asset that generates income while you sleep. I had been given the Sunset Highway Motel, 40 minutes outside the city. Half the sign letters burned out, no guests, no income, nothing but dust and old wood and a parking lot full of empty spaces. My sister tried to hide her smile. She did not try very hard. My husband did not try at all. That night he looked at me across our kitchen and called me useless and told me to take our sons and go live in the motel my father had left me. He said it like he was doing me a favor by being honest. I packed bags for my boys without crying because I had decided he did not get to see that, and I drove 40 minutes down a dark highway to a place I had never, once in my life, imagined sleeping. What I found inside that motel that night changed everything. Before I tell you what it was, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments what country you are watching from. Now let me tell you everything from the beginning. My father was a quiet man who said very little and meant everything he said. He had built a small life with careful hands. Nothing extravagant, nothing wasted. He worked for 30 years in logistics, saved methodically, made a few property investments over the decades that he never talked about publicly, because he believed that people who announced their assets were usually compensating for something. He was not a wealthy man by most definitions, but he was a man who understood the difference between something that looked valuable and something that actually was. He got sick 18 months before he died. Slowly at first, then faster than any of us were prepared for. I visited him every week through the illness. Olivia came when she could, which was less often, because she and her husband were busy with their investment portfolio and their social calendar, and the particular kind of life that keeps you very occupied with itself. I do not say that with bitterness. It was simply true. I was the one who drove him to appointments. I was the one who sat with him in the evenings when the house felt too quiet. I was the one who learned which medications needed to be taken with food and which ones made him nauseated if he took them too close together. I did not do any of it expecting anything in return. He was my father. That was the entire reason. We never talked about the will. He tried once, about 4 months before the end. He started to say something over dinner about the motel, and I stopped him. I told him I did not want to have that conversation yet. I told him I was not ready to think about what came after. He looked at me for a moment and then nodded and changed the subject, and we never returned to it. I wish I had let him finish. My husband Marcus and I had been married for 10 years at the time of my father's death. We had 2 sons, 7 and 9 years old, both of them growing fast and loud and full of opinions about everything. Marcus ran a small construction consulting firm that did reasonably well in good years and struggled in slow ones. He was ambitious in the way that some men are ambitious, constantly measuring, constantly comparing, always aware of where he stood, relative to where he believed he should be standing. For most of our marriage, I had managed to exist comfortably alongside that ambition without being directly targeted by it. After my father's death, that changed. The will reading was 3 weeks after the funeral. The lawyer's office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown. Conference room with a long table and a window that looked out over the city. Olivia and her husband arrived 5 minutes early and took the seats closest to the lawyer. Marcus and I arrived exactly on time. My father's accountant was there as well, a small, careful man named Gerald, who had handled my father's finances for 15 years and who sat with a folder in front of him and said nothing until he was addressed. The lawyer was efficient. He went through the standard language quickly and got to the substance. The downtown apartment complex, 3 buildings, 14 units total, currently generating significant monthly rental income, was to go to Olivia in its entirety. The lawyer read the address and the estimated valuation, and Olivia's husband made a small satisfied sound that he converted into a cough when he noticed me looking at him. Then the lawyer continued. The Sunset Highway Motel, located at a rural highway address 40 minutes outside the city, was to go to Emma. That was me. For a moment the room was silent in the way I described. Then someone shifted in their chair. Then Olivia's husband cleared his throat. Then Gerald looked at his folder. Then Marcus looked at the window. He did not look at me. The drive home was 40 minutes of complete silence. Marcus drove. I sat in the passenger seat and watched the city give way to suburbs and thought about my father's face during that dinner 4 months ago when I had stopped him from explaining. I thought about the way he had nodded and let it go. I wondered what he had been about to say. That evening Olivia and her husband came over for dinner. I still do not understand exactly why I agreed to that. Some reflex of normalcy, I suppose. Some desire to pretend for a few hours that the day had been ordinary. The dinner was not ordinary. It felt like sitting inside someone else's celebration. Olivia talked about renovation plans for the apartments. Her husband talked about rental yield projections. Marcus laughed at the right moments and refilled their glasses, and at one point raised his own glass and said, "Well, at least one daughter got the real assets," and everyone at the table laughed except me. I smiled. It was the kind of smile that costs something after they left. Marcus and I stood in the kitchen with the quiet of the house around us, and I thought he might say something kind. Something that acknowledged how the day had felt. Instead, he said a motel. Just those 2 words, flatly, like a verdict. I started clearing the table and said nothing. A broken highway motel, he continued. It is still property, I said. He turned toward me. Your sister walks away with real assets, and you walk away with a liability. He paused. You know what your father was saying with that will? I kept clearing plates. He was saying what everyone already knows, Marcus said. Your sister is the capable one. I set a plate down carefully on the counter. Then he said it. You are useless, Emma. His voice was not raised. It was almost worse that way. Flat and certain. Like a thing he had been thinking for a while, and had finally decided there was no reason to keep quiet about. I stood very still. He looked toward the ceiling in the direction of our boys' rooms. Then he looked back at me. Take them and go, he said. Go live in the motel your father thought you deserved. I looked at him for a long moment. I was waiting for him to hear himself, to register what he had just said and pull it back. He did not. His expression did not change. He was not angry. He was not even particularly engaged. He had made a decision and stated it, and was waiting for me to comply. I walked upstairs. I packed 2 bags for my sons quietly, so they would not wake up fully. They stirred when I lifted them, but neither of them came all the way to consciousness. I carried them to the car one at a time, and buckled them in, and went back for the bags. Marcus was in the kitchen when I came back downstairs. He did not say anything. I did not say anything. I picked up my own bag from the hallway, and walked out the front door and got in the car. The highway was dark. My younger son slept the entire drive. My older son woke up about 20 minutes in, and asked me in a small, careful voice if we were moving. I told him just for a little while. He looked out the window for a moment and then asked if he could have the window seat at the new place. I told him yes. He went back to sleep. The motel sign was the first thing I saw when I pulled off the highway. Half the letters were dark. The ones that still worked spelled out something that was not quite a word. The parking lot was empty. The office light was on, a single lamp visible through the glass, but the rest of the property was dark and still. I parked and sat for a moment with the engine off, listening to my sons breathe in the back seat. I got out and walked to the office. The door was unlocked. The smell hit me immediately. Old wood, closed air, dust that had been settling for a long time undisturbed. A clock on the wall had stopped. There was a guest book on the counter with entries that ended 2 years earlier. Behind the counter was my father's chair, an old wooden thing with a cushion that had flattened from years of use, and I recognized it immediately. because it had been in his first office before he closed that business, and I used to sit in it as a child and spin myself around until I was dizzy. I sat in it now. I brought my sons in and found the cleanest room and wiped the beds down with tissues from my bag and spread our jackets over the sheets because the blankets looked like they needed washing. My boys were barely awake. They lay down and were asleep again within minutes. I stood in the doorway watching them for a long time. Then I went back to the office. I do not know exactly what I was looking for. Maybe nothing. Maybe I just needed to do something with my hands. I opened the drawers behind the counter one by one. The first was empty. The second had old receipts bundled with rubber bands that had lost their elasticity. The third had a pen, a spare key on a plain ring, and a photograph that had been placed face down. I turned it over. It was a picture of me and my father from years ago, standing outside somewhere, both of us squinting into the sun. I was maybe 12. He had his arm around my shoulders, and he was laughing at something outside the frame. I put it face up on the counter where I could see it. I kept looking. I am not sure why. Something about the office felt like it was holding something. Like the air in it was denser than it should have been. Then I noticed the cabinet. It was behind the front desk, positioned against the wall between two shelving units. I had not seen it immediately because it was partially obscured by the shelving, but once I noticed it, I could not understand how I had missed it. It was wooden, but newer than everything else in the room. Cleaner. The dust that covered every other surface in the office had not settled on this one in the same way. It looked like something that had been placed there deliberately, and not very long ago, relative to everything else. The door had a small lock. A keyhole, simple, old-fashioned, and on a small nail beside it, hanging there plainly, was a key. I stood in front of it for a moment. My father had been sick for 18 months. Toward the end, he had been in and out of the hospital. He had not been to this motel in at least 6 months that I knew of. And yet, here was a cabinet that looked newer than its surroundings and a key, left in plain sight, as though he had known someone would come looking and wanted to make sure they could get in. As though he had known exactly who would come and exactly when. My hands were cold when I reached for the key. Not from fear of what was inside, from fear of what might not be. Because if I opened this cabinet and found nothing, if it was empty, or full of old paperwork with no significance, then I would have to accept that the motel was exactly what everyone said it was. And that my father had simply given me the lesser thing and dressed it in mystery to soften the blow. And I was not sure I could carry that. The key turned easily. Too easily for something that supposedly had not been used in months. Like it had been turned recently, and the mechanism had not yet stiffened back up. I opened the door. Inside there was no cash, no jewelry, no object of obvious value. What there was instead was a stack of files in manila folders, a collection of sealed envelopes of various sizes, a rolled document held with a rubber band, and at the back of the lower shelf, a small metal box with its own lock. I took everything out carefully and laid it on the counter. I opened the rolled document first. It was a land survey, the kind with measurements and boundary lines and notations in small, precise print. The motel property was outlined in red ink. I could identify the building footprints, the parking area, the access road from the highway. But running along the back edge of the property, marked in blue, was a line I did not recognize. It cut across what appeared to be open land behind the last row of motel rooms. I did not know what it represented. I set the map aside and opened the first envelope. Letters, printed on official letterheads, some from the city planning department, some from private development companies, some from a firm whose name I did not recognize, but which appeared repeatedly across multiple documents. They were all addressed to my father. They spanned several years, but the most recent ones were dated within the last 4 months. The last 4 months of his life, the language in them was specific and consistent. Proposed highway extension, commercial rezoning application, redevelopment corridor, acquisition interest, and in the most recent letters, a phrase that appeared 3 times in 3 separate documents, The property at Sunset Highway represents a critical access point for the proposed exit infrastructure. I read that sentence again. Then I opened the second envelope. It contained an offer letter from a development company, addressed to my father, offering to purchase the motel property, specifically the land, at a figure that I had to read twice, because the first time I read it, I thought I had misunderstood the number of zeros. It was more money than Marcus had earned in the entire decade of our marriage combined. I sat down in my father's chair. The motel was not valuable because of its rooms. It was not valuable because of the business it had run or failed to run. It was valuable because of the land it sat on. Specifically, the back portion of the land, the portion marked with the blue line on the survey map, which sat directly in the planned path of a highway expansion project. When the city completed that expansion, when the new exit was built, the Sunset Highway Motel would sit at the intersection of two major traffic routes, the kind of location that developers spent years and significant money trying to acquire. The kind of location you could not replicate because geography was not replicable. My father had received multiple offers. The letters made that clear. Multiple companies had approached him over several years, each time offering more than the last, each time being declined. Every single offer letter in that stack had been answered with the same response. Offer declined. Not sold. Not transferred. Not negotiated. Declined. He had been sitting on this land deliberately, waiting for something. Or waiting for someone. I reached for the metal box. The key for it was inside the first envelope, tucked into the fold of the paper, as though placed there knowing I would open that one first. It fit the lock precisely. I opened the lid. Inside the box was one thing. A single sheet of paper, folded twice, handwritten, in my father's handwriting. The particular handwriting I had grown up reading on birthday cards and grocery lists, and the occasional note left on the kitchen counter when he had gone somewhere and wanted me to know. I unfolded it. Emma, he had written, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you are exactly where I intended you to be. I stopped reading for a moment. The office was very quiet. The highway outside was distant. My sons were asleep 20 feet away. I continued, I know what people will think when they hear the will. Let them think it. That is part of the plan. I did not give you the motel because it was small. I gave it to you because it is the most valuable piece of land I have ever owned, and I needed it to go to the person I trusted most to understand what to do with it. My eyes were full, but I kept reading. The city approved the highway extension project 3 months ago. I have spoken with the planning office and with 2 of the development companies who have approached me. The rezoning will be completed within the year. When the exit is built, this land becomes prime commercial property. Hotels, fuel stations, restaurants, retail. The offers will come quickly once construction begins, and they will be significantly larger than what you have seen in those envelopes because desperation increases price, and developers become desperate when timelines are fixed, and land is irreplaceable. He had known. He had planned this. Sitting in his chair in the evenings, while I made sure his medications were organized, and his appointments were in the calendar, he had been quietly arranging something for me that I had no idea existed. You have always been patient, the letter continued. You look at a thing fully before you respond to it. You do not perform your intelligence. You simply use it. That is rarer than people understand, and it is exactly what this situation will require. The developers will try to move quickly. They will present large numbers designed to feel like generosity, but structured to serve their timeline. Not your interest. Take your time. Get independent valuations. Do not let urgency that belongs to someone else become urgency that belongs to you. A final paragraph. There is a meeting request from Horizon Development at the bottom of the file stack. They are the most serious of the interested parties. They have contacted me 4 times. Call them after the highway approval is confirmed. Tell them you are the new owner. Let them come to you. And Emma, whatever anyone says about this place, whatever anyone calls it, remember that your father chose it for you specifically because he believed you were the only one who would know what to do with it. That was the end of the letter. I sat in his chair in the silence of that office for a long time. Long enough for the lamp to flicker once and settle, long enough for a truck to pass on the highway outside, and for the sound of it to fade completely. Long enough for something inside me that had been very tight since the will reading to release itself quietly and completely. He had not given me the lesser thing. He had given me the thing that required the most of me to receive. The one that would look like nothing to everyone watching and reveal itself only to someone willing to look past the surface of it. He had given it to the daughter he trusted to be patient, to read before acting. To not be fooled as by appearances, he had given it to me because he believed in exactly the kind of person I was. I folded the letter and put it back in the box and locked it. I put everything back in the cabinet and locked that too. Not because I was afraid of anyone finding it. Because I was not ready yet. The information was mine and the timing would be mine, and I had learned in the last few hours that patience was not weakness. It was strategy. I slept a few hours in the chair that night, not well, but enough. The next morning my phone rang at 8:15. My sister's voice was bright and easy. The particular brightness of someone who has recently confirmed that things are going their way. She told me she was refinancing one of the apartment buildings, that investors were interested, that things were moving well. Then she asked how the motel was. Quiet, I told her. She laughed. Well, she said, at least it's peaceful out there. After the call, I stepped outside into the morning air. The highway was already busy. Cars and trucks moving through without slowing. No one looked at the motel. No one had reason to. Yet, I walked to the back of the property, past the last row of rooms, to the open land where the blue line on the survey map had been drawn. It was flat and unremarkable. Dry grass, a few old fence posts, nothing visible that announced what it was. But I stood on it, and I thought about the line on the map and the letters in the cabinet, and my father's handwriting on that folded piece of paper, and I felt something I had not felt since before he died. I felt choned. I felt chosen. I called the city planning office from the parking lot, while my sons ate cereal I had found in a cabinet in the office kitchen, still sealed, still good. A woman answered on the third ring. I gave her the motel address. I asked about the highway extension project. She put me on hold briefly. When she came back, her voice was matter-of-fact and entirely unaware of what she was about to do to my understanding of the last 24 hours. The extension was approved, she said. 6 weeks ago. Preliminary construction would begin in 4 months. The area would be rezoned for commercial use. I thanked her and ended the call. I stood in the parking lot for a moment. The morning air was cool. A truck moved past on the highway without slowing. 4 months. I went back inside and found the Horizon Development contact at the bottom of the file stack, exactly where my father had said it would be. I called the number. A man answered and introduced himself as the head of acquisitions. When I told him I was the new owner of the Sunset Highway Motel, there was a pause, a short one, but I noticed it. He said they had been trying to reach the previous owner. I told him my father had passed away. Another pause. Then his voice shifted into something more careful and more interested. He said they remained very interested in the property. He asked if we could meet. I said Friday worked for me. He said he would be there. On Thursday evening, Marcus called. His voice had the particular tone of someone who has decided to be reasonable after a period of being unreasonable and expects credit for the adjustment. He asked if I had come to my senses. He said I had no income. He said I could not stay at the motel indefinitely. He mentioned that my sister was closing a significant deal and suggested I should take note of what real success looked like. I looked out the office window at my sons playing in the parking lot. I told him I was fine. He sighed. Then he said, maybe when fine things settle down we should talk about what came next. I told him I would let him know. Sing. On Friday morning, 3 people arrived from Horizon Development. They walked the property with the focused attention of people who have already done their calculations and are now confirming them with their own eyes. They measured the back land. They took photographs from multiple angles. They spoke to each other in low voices about access points and grade levels and setback requirements. They did not look disgusted by the motel. They did not laugh at the sign or the empty parking lot or the rooms that needed work. They looked at the land behind it, with an expression I recognized from watching Marcus look at things he wanted very badly. We sat in the office afterward. The man from the phone told me that once the exit infrastructure was complete, the Sunset Highway location would become one of the most commercially accessible points on that corridor. He said the demand for development rights in that area was already significant and would increase substantially as the construction timeline became public. He said his company was prepared to make an offer today. He slid a folder across the counter. I opened it. The number was larger than the number in the envelopes in the cabinet. Significantly larger. It was more money than Marcus had earned in 10 years. More than my sister's apartment buildings generated in annual rental income. And this, the man across from me said carefully, was the opening position. I told him I would need 48 hours. He said, of course. After they left, I stood in the parking lot and looked at my phone. There was a message in the family group chat. My sister had posted a photo of herself and her husband at a restaurant with their investors. She had captioned it celebrating real assets. I looked at it for a moment, then I typed one message to the group. Let's have dinner Sunday. My treat. Same restaurant. Sunday evening, I arrived before them and chose the same table from the photograph. My sister arrived looking confident and composed. Her husband arrived looking pleased with himself in the background, way that pleased men often look. Chris arrived last and sat down without making eye contact with me directly, which was his way of signaling that he was being magnanimous by showing up. My sister asked how I was settling into the motel. I told her it was peaceful. Marcus leaned back in his chair. He asked if I was ready to admit I had made a mistake by not negotiating with him before things escalated. I placed the folder from Horizon Development on the table. He looked at it. What's that? He said. An offer, I said. For the motel. He smiled. The particular smile of someone about to demonstrate that they are right. Who would pay serious money for that place, he said. I slid the folder across the table. His smile stopped. My sister reached over and looked at the number. The color in her face changed slowly, like something draining. Marcus read it twice. Then he looked up at me. This isn't real, he said. It is, I said. And that's just the opening offer. The table was silent, in the way that tables go silent when something has conclusively ended. My sister said quietly that the number was more than her buildings were worth. I said yes. Marcus asked if I had known. I said my father knew. And he left it to me. The waiter came to the table and asked if everything was all right. I closed the folder and told him everything was fine. That everything was finally exactly fine. 2 months later, I signed the final agreement with Horizon Development. I did not sell the land outright. I negotiated a development partnership that gave me a percentage of the commercial income generated by sites once it was operational. My father's accountant, Gerald, who turned out to be extremely good at his job when given something worth being good at, helped me structure it. The immediate payment secured my son's futures. The ongoing income secured mine. I filed for divorce the same week I signed the development agreement. Marcus did not call me useless when the papers arrived. He called and asked if we could talk. I told him I thought we had said everything that needed to be said the night he told me to go live in a broken motel. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said he understood. I appreciated that he did not argue. My sister called a week after the papers were filed. She was warm and careful in the way people are warm and careful when they are recalibrating. She did not call the motel a motel anymore. She called it the property. She asked thoughtful questions about the development timeline. I answered them honestly because she was still my sister. And that did not stop mattering simply because things had been complicated. But something between us had shifted, and we both knew it, and neither of us pretended otherwise. Today, when I drive past the site, I see the early framing of what will eventually be a commercial intersection. Steel and concrete where the old parking lot used to be. The sign is gone. The rooms are gone. The dusty office with my father's chair is gone. But the land is still mine. The blue line on the survey map has become a real road. The thing my father saw when no one else was looking has become a thing everyone can see. He gave me a broken motel on a dark highway, and everyone who looked at it saw failure. He saw a future that belonged to the daughter patient enough to look past the surface of things and trust that the person who loved her most had seen something real. I used to think the greatest thing my father gave me was his time during those 18 months, the appointments and the evenings and the medications, and the quiet companionship of being the person who stayed. Now I think those things and the motel were the same gift. Both of them were him saying, "I see exactly who you are." Both of them were him saying, "I trust you completely." Both of them were him saying, "This is yours because you have already proven. You know how to take care of what matters." He was not wrong about any of it. The night my husband told me to leave, he believed he was sending me somewhere I did not deserve to be. He had no way of knowing he was sending me to the place my father had spent years preparing for me. He had no way of knowing that the thing he called garbage was the most carefully chosen gift I had ever been given. Some people will spend their entire lives measuring worth by what something looks like from the outside. My father taught me to look longer and think deeper and wait for the full picture before deciding what something means. I am still learning that lesson every day, but I understand it now in a way I did not before that night. And I am grateful for all of it, even the hard parts, especially the hard parts, because they were the ones that brought me here. If this story stayed with you, leave a heart in the comments below. And tell me, has someone ever believed in you in a way you did not fully understand until later? I read every single one. Subscribe so you never miss the next story.